My name is Sheila Marie Alonco Mackey. I happen to be 100% Finnish. Both my maternal and paternal grandparents migrated from Finland, so both of my parents are 100% Finnish. So I too am 100% Finnish. And so on my father's side, the Makis, there is less known about them because they weren't talkers, they weren't storytellers. So I'll tell their story first. My mother's side of the family, they were storytellers and told the have made sure that we generations have gotten the story down over time. So it's my understanding that Grandma and Grandpa Mackey came here from Finland. The mining industry kind of drew them. Grandpa Mackey was a logger, so he came for the purpose of providing the timbers in the coal mines. They homesteaded up what's called Dark Canyon, Muncie Creek. When they first moved here, they grew potatoes and raised Hereford cattle for their means of living. My dad and his brothers then were the ones to then deliver those potatoes to Cresta Butte, and then I think my dad would take them to southern Wyoming also. On their way, when the Mackeys came the northern route from Finland, they came to Minnesota, down through Wyoming, and eventually here. And so the potatoes then got taken to Cresta Butte to be sold. That was in approximately the early 1900s. My dad was born in 1905 in Minnesota, so I know it would have been after that, like maybe 1907, 1908, when they homesteaded up here. And in about 1926, Grandma Mackey said, "I'm tired of living up here in the cold country, up here in Dark Canyon," and so they moved to 25 acres outside of Paonia, where I then grew up. And my dad and his brothers, who owned that property together, 1 mile outside of Paonia, they raised hay. And my Uncle Ernie and my Uncle Salo were the laborers, more or less. And my dad then, in the winter, they would put the hay in our barn. They would hold back until the local ranchers sort of got desperate, if you will, in January, and were looking for hay, and then would sell it. They had some regulars, customers, but they then wouldn't sell it until about January. On my mother's side of the family, the Aloncos, that I know that story much better. Grandma and Grandpa Alonco came here in 1914. They met in Boston. Outside of Boston, a little town called Quincy, Massachusetts, is where Grandma and Grandpa both, not together, they didn't come together. Grandma and Grandpa Mackey came to the country together, but Grandma and Grandpa Alonco did not come to the country together. They met in Quincy, Massachusetts after they came here. And then they made their way to Somerset in 1914. Grandma came to Massachusetts I have a picture of her in 1912 there, so somewhere in that general vicinity. And she worked in a boarding house in Quincy for, I guess the lady was just a horrid lady to work for, and then met Grandpa. And Grandpa had 3 aunts that had already moved to the Somerset area, and so that's what drew them here. Those aunts were already here, and so he moved here knowing that those aunts lived here already. Grandpa Alonco, he didn't have quite the set career path that the Mackeys did. Grandpa, he was a trained watchmaker, watch repairman from Finland. He worked as a security guard at the coal mines, did some farming, did some local caretaking for local rancher farmers and so forth, but he didn't have quite the clear-cut path that the Mackeys did. Later in his life, Grandpa Alonco tried to strike a deal with the Bear brothers, who owned the Bear coal mine for many years, and that just didn't work. Grandpa wasn't quite the savvy businessman that the Bear brothers were, and it fell apart. It honestly fell apart. But Grandpa Alonco was part of starting the Blue Ribbon Coal Mine. The locals will recognize that name, and so that's what brought them here. And my dad too, my uncles, many people that we knew, cousins. Yeah, that's what was talked about around the table was what how things went in the coal mine, what it was like down there. It was our lives here especially in the North Fork Valley. If a man wasn't a coal miner, he possibly was a coal miner and a rancher. Many of them did that. But if the family wasn't a coal mining family or a strong agriculture family like the Allen family here in the Hotchkiss area, agriculture sustained them. They didn't need to work in the coal mines. But if you weren't one of those, then you were either a teacher or you worked for, say, perhaps Delta County. But coal mining was it. It was the story of the valley, especially if you lived in Paonia, Hotchkiss, or Crawford. And so, yeah, it was talked about. And so the conditions were not great. There were areas that the guys were working, they were standing in their waist up to water. There were areas that they were working where it was just really hot, really cold. Certainly the dangers. At that time, the mining style was continuous miner. It was not like it is now, what they call longwall, where now they can literally drive a semi down in the mines. Back then, continuous miner style mining, they could not. It was a continuous miner in a mine trap that went in and dug the coal, and then it spit it out on a conveyor belt, and then it got up eventually to the top where they could load it into the loadouts. So it and not that it's, I mean, coal mining probably still is in the top, if not 5 dangerous occupations in the United States. But at that time, it probably was closer to being in the top 3. The conditions were quite dangerous. The methane that existed and still exists, and other things that could cause explosions and fires. There is a reason Fire Mountain Canal is called Fire Mountain Canal. That hillside has been on fire underground for centuries, and so that posed an extra danger. The guys knew about that, and so yeah, it was, and women and children worried. At that time, if you lived in Paonia, and I'm sure it lived in Hotchkiss, I lived in Paonia at the time, so I know that a little bit better in my childhood until I turned 18. If the fire sirens went off at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and there didn't, or being a kid, there had to have been something that made the adults know the difference between whether it was a fire siren for fires or a fire siren because there was a danger at the coal mines. But anyway, there was a siren that would get sounded, and that meant something was going on at the coal mines. And so if we heard that, then made everybody worry. Fortunately, that never happened too many times. It did happen a couple of times in my childhood, and went all 12 years of school to Paonia. We didn't have kindergarten in Paonia when I started. No, as far as any challenges or we all knew each other for the most part. We all started in first grade together. You can look at my first grade picture and look at my senior yearbook. There's not too much difference there. I graduated from high school. I I went away long enough to go to Mesa College in Grand Junction. I didn't go there and live. I actually commuted back and forth. And I have done what, if you grow up in Delta County and you know Delta County, you know that it takes a special person and skills to survive here in Delta County. And so that's what I've done. I have just survived. I have done just about literally everything that you can possibly do in Delta County to survive, but I have done it. And I have there's a few times when I've been unemployed and I've thought, I could probably go visit a cousin in the Denver area and get a job just like that, and have a job and make money. But then I go, but that'd be in Denver. And so I get over that right away and go, okay, Sheila, you live in Delta County, you know Delta County, and then usually within no time at all, I have things taken care of. Because it is a small community and we all know each other, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad, but we all know each other, but we take care of each other. That's just what rural does. We take care of each other. And so I have no desire to leave. I live in the home that was my parents' home when my mom and dad needed to leave the small farm in 1976. My dad's health went downhill and we needed to leave the farm in 1976. We bought a mobile home and put it on a lot up here in Hotchkiss, and I moved in here when my mom went in the nursing home, and they'll probably carry me out in the pine boxes how I'll end up leaving. So my dad's brothers and my half-sister who lived here for my dad's first marriage. My mom and her brother and sister and their children lived here in the valley, and so we were a close family. We spent a lot of time together. Family spent time together. We us kids played together. The adults did projects together, whether it was painting grandma's house or whatever. Part of what has kept me here is just that close family connection. I would say that all of my favorite childhood memories, they involve my family, being with my family, and going somewhere on a picnic, climbing into my uncle's Jeep, going jeeping somewhere. My uncle, when they were in Denver, bringing his boat over and we'd go boating on Crawford Reservoir. So yeah, my good childhood memories are with family going somewhere, or the house I grew up in was a fairly large house, and my mother was an awesome cook. And just about anybody in the family will tell you that my mother was an awesome cook. And so our house was kind of the gathering place around holidays, or when the family that didn't live here came here to visit. So our house was the place that, it was a two-story, and upstairs there was two huge bedrooms, and so my mother, the family was always gathered there, and my mother probably cooked till her fingers bled to satisfy all those people. But that's what made my mother happy. My mother was in her glory when she was cooking for the family. Mm-hmm. Her daughter can't cook much more than macaroni and cheese, but my mother was in her glory when she did that. When she was pleasing the family with cooking, my mother was in her happiness. The truth of the matter is, coal mining that has sustained this valley for well over 100 years, probably pushing 150, it's going to go away. The coal seam that has existed in our hillside up in the Somerset Bowie area, it is going to run out. Hoping I don't live long enough to see the day when it is totally gone, but we're getting close. We're getting close. Agriculture, I don't want to see that go away either. It is another one of the things that has kept this valley sustained. I would have to look up my statistics, but I believe it was like the 1898 World Fair in Chicago or something like that. Our fruit became famous. And we have lost many of our orchards, especially in the North Fork Valley. We've lost many of our orchards. And so I don't want to see the agriculture go away. I think the vineyards that have came in the last approximately 25 years, I think many of those are doing well, and I think that's great. There are some other crops that have moved in. I'm not going to go there, but I don't think they're as good of an idea. But I think there are other things that can be looked at in the way of produce and things that can be grown here to keep the agriculture going. Down in Delta, over the years, I've seen the crops come and go there. I mean, my gosh, the pinto beans that used to be grown there, and the onions and the lettuce, those farmers are not doing that anymore for whatever reason. The sugar beets back in the, I think the 50s, maybe even before the 50s, the sugar beets were brought to Delta. That has gone away. In fact, I personally have created a scholarship account that will be formed with my life insurance money for students wanting to go to college for something in the agriculture field. And so that's a desire to me, that the agriculture not go away, because the intelligent person in me knows that the coal mine, those will eventually, it's just going to go away. It is what it is. If you live in rural, you understand rural. Rural people have a certain mindset, a certain way of thinking. And that would be just as difficult if I were to have to all of a sudden live in an urban area. That would be a culture shock for me. And so for somebody moving here from a large area such as Denver or LA area or wherever, coming to a rural area is a whole different mindset. We are survivalists. We are tight-knit. I can't make a real clear comparison because I've never been urban, and so I don't really know. But for people moving here from areas that aren't rural areas of 1,000 people or less, it's got to be a challenge of a transition. Like any other change in life, you can take it on and you can learn and do what you need to do, or you can fight it all the way. And I've seen that here in Delta County in my years. I'm a community person. I've been involved on Hotchkiss Town Council, North Fork Ambulance Board, Delta County Search and Rescue. The list is quite long of community things that I've done over the years. And I have seen people move here from other areas and come in and try to fix it, change it, make it different. And not saying some of their changes have been wrong or bad, but there's a way to go about getting us rural people to change. We don't take change as easily as somebody from urban. So I've seen that happen over the years. We've had people move here and they jump right in and they join town councils and they join boards and they join library boards, trying to get those of us who have lived here forever and ever to change. Some of it's been good, some of it not so good. If the area has taught me any lessons, how to survive. How to know when and where to keep your mouth shut, and when you are talking, have a pretty good idea of who might be close enough to hear, because in small town, it might go against you one way or another, or something. So, yeah, and know your neighbors and be kind to your neighbors, and if help that person, because karma's gonna come back around again, and that's probably more so in rural area, just because everybody knows your business. I'm sorry, you live in a rural area, everybody's gonna know your business. For those of us who have stayed here in the North Fork Valley and have made this our home, as we have grown up, became adults ourselves, had families or not, got married or not, many of us have gotten involved in the community. I've known just about every one of the county commissioners since I was an adult. The people that have served on Hotchkiss Town Council, Peonia Town Council, the important entities in our community such as the fire departments and the ambulance, knowing those people who sit on those boards of directors and keep those things going, the school boards, and then of course there are the community things out there too. As those of us that grew up, such as Mark Rober and myself and Kevin Parks, and others that have grew up in this valley, we then got involved so that we could have the decisions and the process, the changing process here in Delta County. There's somebody famous in history that says the only thing inevitable is change. And so if you are somebody who is aware of that, then and it is important to you, then get your buns out there and be part of that change. Join a board, find out what it takes to be on a town council. If you're interested in what's going on with your children in school, go to those meetings, go to those PTA meetings, go to those accountability meetings, because that's how you keep something that's important to you. That's how you keep it, how it stays being important, and how it then doesn't become somewhere that you want to move away from, as a lot of the people that are moving into this valley have moved away from somewhere. It's those of us that have stayed here, done our best to sustain the valley, and we will continue to stay here and sustain the valley while others come and go and come and go. There are a few of us that will just stay right here. And there's a handful of names I can give you, but they can come tell their story. And my gosh, what to enjoy here. There is nowhere in Delta County that you can't look. Stand wherever you're standing and look to either your left or right or straight ahead. You most likely are not going to have to turn around and just look at the beauty that we live in. God spent a couple of extra minutes on this valley. It's beautiful. And even if you live in, say, downtown Delta, you gotta drive, 20 minutes to be somewhere, to be in just absolute beauty. Here in Hotchkiss, it's a 10-minute drive to go up LaRue Creek. It's a 20-minute drive to Black Canyon. On a good day when I don't have all my neighbors' trees in full leaf, I can almost see the Black Canyon. So I can see Red Canyon for sure. Why would somebody not want to stay here? I'm not leaving.